Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
So I posted the topic for tonight, the rise of black secularism, and immediately I began to see the response. What are you thinking, Seth? What are you doing? What's the matter with you? You of all people, why would you step into this minefield of controversy? Why would you seek to divide people along racial lines? Why would you, white bread, corn-fed Oklahoma redneck, host a radio show that calls out classifications based on skin color and deals with the perspectives and the challenges of the atheist who is not a white bread, corn-fed Oklahoma redneck? Right? Aren't we supposed to be colorblind? Why is this discussion even happening? Why are these questions being asked? What are you thinking? I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I'm curious. I'm thinking that I want to know more. I've got questions. And I am done apologizing for having questions. In fact, I'm leery of anybody anywhere who tells me I'm not qualified or allowed to ask questions. To genuinely seek understanding on any issue because what? I was born in the wrong place? Because I'm the wrong color? Because it's just not done? Forget it. I want to know. I got my fill of that nonsense when I was religious. Hey, you're not qualified to go any deeper on this particular subject, Seth. Just take our word for it, opt out, and know your place. If I have questions, why would I ever be satisfied with not knowing? Why would curiosity, honest, sincere, respectful curiosity, be reason for another to freak out, to take offense, to insult, to accuse, to ostracize? Isn't that what the scientist in all of us is supposed to be doing? To be asking and testing and learning and understanding. We're going to talk like real people. We're going to come together in a society that exists in a state of perpetual offense about everything, and we're going to decide that even the taboo topics are not going to send us into a tailspin. Because we're going to approach the issues with goodwill, open minds, respect, and a desire to know more tomorrow than we did today. And I brought along some friends to participate as kind of a panel in the discussion. Again, I'm looking for Jamila on the line. I think I see her there. Is that Jamila Bey, 202?
That's me. Of course. I'm in D.C. I'm from Pittsburgh, go Steelers, but I live in D.C. Thank you for having me, Seth.
Jamila Bey is are you still broadcasting?
I'm not broadcasting since, well, you know, it was kind of unpleasant. Vladimir Putin did fire me, but, you know, we bounced back.
Yeah.
We bounced back, and right now I am 3 weeks old as the Director of Communications for the Secular Student Alliance. So I get to talk and write and research and talk up the rise of free-thinking, non-religious doctrine adhering to, and frankly, even if people do adhere to religious doctrine, the belief that secularism is the way that this country needs to go in terms of its young people in schools. So I'm kind of new. I still have water behind my ears, but I'm having fun and I'm doing it.
They're fortunate to have you. You're the real thing, Jamil. I'm glad you made it to the show. Also on my roster tonight, I've got Alix Jules. He's the coordinator for the DFW Core, the Coalition of Reason, and he's president of Black Nonbelievers of Dallas. Alix, thanks for joining me for the show tonight.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
I heard you speak down at the Florida Humanist Conference. Was it Florida Humanist that I saw you speak?
Yes, it was.
James Randi was there and everybody. It was just freaking amazing. And I made a decision then that if we did this show that you were going to be a part of it. And then Bridgette Gaudette, who is executive director for the Florida Humanist Association, has joined us as well. Do I have you on the line, Bridgette?
I am. Thank you for having me.
I'll start with an email from a young lady named Ella. She said, I'm an African American from North Carolina. I'm the only atheist in my family. I'm 26. I've gone to college and law school, and as far as I know, I've only ever met one other black atheist ever. I'm also a lesbian. Needless to say, I'm not out in any sense of the word to almost anyone I'm related to. I've also lost quite a few close friends in the past few years as I've tried to live more honestly and openly in my social life. I'm deeply conflicted about religion in Black America. On one hand, I know how our religious communities have provided social support for generations of my people and fueled social change that I undoubtedly benefit from today. On the other hand, religion is most definitely the proximate cause of the hurt, stress, and pain that permeates the relationship I have with my parents. The same religion that inspired the likes of Martin Luther King Jr. has ripped my family to shreds. I don't always feel like the atheist movement does as much as it could to make space for the unique experiences and voices of racial and ethnic minorities. I hope that in the future, atheist conferences and activist groups will be more diverse and represent a wider range of ex-religious backgrounds. Until then, I choose to embrace the goals and experiences we all share. I also try to live my life in a way that will hopefully make it easier for more of us to come out as atheists without fear of isolation and stigmatization. All right, Ella uses the term African American. Is it African American? Should I be saying black? Which is the preferred, which is the most appropriate choice of language when dealing with this subject? You guys want to help me out?
This is Bridgette. I personally prefer black, and I have actually polled my black friends before, and that tends to be what most of us accept, although African American, I'm used to that as far as like in the media, so whichever is fine, but I personally prefer black.
Bridgette, I've got kind of a spotty connection with you. I'm going to make a note here of your number. I'm going to have you call back on the switchboard if you would, and I'm going to see if we can reset that connection, okay?
Okay.
Call me right back. I'm sorry, Jamila, go ahead. What do you have for me?
I love Bridgette's answer because I, too, personally prefer black, and I am accustomed to being referred to as African American. Bridgette called out media because, yes, in that so politically correct news anchor language or, academic language, African American sounds more lofty or whatnot. But here's the thing. If I'm sitting next to my dear friend communist Ian Cromwell, who is from Canada, and I'm sitting next to one of the dark-colored people from anywhere in the Caribbean, I'm the only African-American amongst them. You cannot call somebody from Canada African-American, and there are a whole bunch of atheists and skeptics who are Caribbean. So unless you know for a fact that somebody comes from Pittsburgh, why would you call them African American? Black is a way to refer to people beyond the geographic border of the USA.
Alex, you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I think Jamila actually nailed it. I happen to be of African Caribbean descent, so African American is a little bit exclusionary, especially with some of the circles that I run in, where you have Haitians who happen to be atheists and Trinidadians who happen to be atheists, etc. And they're either still on the islands and we're reaching out to them, or they're here and they happen to be trying to matriculate into this culture, but they are by no means African American. So black tends to be a really big umbrella, and it also tends to talk about a much larger, broader spectrum, because you got light, bright, damn near white. And my grandmother told me that one, right? So it really does cover a lot of different experiences that roll up what it means to be black in America.
Right. I sometimes feel like I'm walking through a minefield when it deals with this kind of thing. I'm terrified of making a mistake. I'm terrified of saying something that is inadvertently an offensive thing to someone. So if I do say anything that's just hugely ignorant, you guys just, let me know. But understand where the place that it comes from is just a desire to know, okay?
Got it. Very genuine and kind disclaimer on your part, Seth. I personally believe that it's not at all necessary because we're human. We all say things that other people have to interpret how they want, and the intent really does matter. So This is your time to ask. It's your show. You invited us. We're here. So ask away. Not that I need to tell you to do your job. But
let's hit the big one, all right? Why race? Why color? Why are you guys dividing people along color lines? Aren't we supposed to be colorblind? We're all African anyway. Isn't this a distraction from what should be a unifying thing? And so I want each of you, if you would, to tell me, why in the world are we talking about black as a color when we're supposed to be colorblind?
Because we're not. I mean, that's the reality, isn't it? I mean, because we're really not. I mean, this is something I tend to talk to pretty frequently. We like to look at ourselves and put ourselves on this pedestal because, hey, we are educated and we tend to be a little bit more educated than the believers, statistically speaking, right? And so that should mean that because you are an atheist or a non-believer or a free thinker, whatever label you like, just because you are that, you are above reproach. So are we saying that we don't have racist atheists? Well, the fact of the matter is we do, right? And we do have differences. And the fact that you're an atheist, that is somewhat unifying. But you take a look at what we see in the non-secular world and just out there in churches, right? I mean, they all believe in the same thing, basically, right? At least most of the denominations. But you walk in on any Sunday, right? And the church is still one of the most segregated places, at least in the U.S. And so we still have that same paradigm in our broader atheist community. We tend to focus on very insular discussions, some of them very, very academic, and a lot of them may not have the level of relevance for African Americans or blacks in general that we want to engage in.
This is Bridgette. Can you hear me? I don't know if
I can. You sound great. I think we got the problem solved, so you're all set to go.
Well, I was thinking first, what exactly do we mean by colorblind? And as a person of color, to me, when people says that, it's saying we don't see you. But as a person of color, I like who I am. I don't want to be unseen or invisible. Colorblindness implies that there's something shameful about the way I am or my culture that I was born into. And colorblindness has helped make race into this taboo topic that polite people can't openly discuss. And if you can't talk about it, you can't understand it, much less fix any kind of racial problems that plague our society. So let's look at multiculturalism, not ignore that we're a little different.
Jamila Bey.
I find the concept of colorblindness condescending and just really stupid. I personally, I mean, look, I understand that there are people who say it with good intention, and I'm entitled to my opinion. But if you go, and there are some people who I'm sure would say such a thing, but I am gender blind. I just don't notice if you're a man or a woman or if you appear to be whatever. If you really want to be inclusive when we're talking about gender, then you say, okay, what is your preferred pronoun? Can you tell me how you prefer that I address you? Am I able to ask you these things? And rarely will a person say, I have my own personal gender and I'm not going to talk about it and I don't want you to use the wrong... No, you ask, you talk about it. It's not, I'm a gender blind person. So to tell me that, Jamila, I'm colorblind, I just don't see color. I don't recognize the kink in your hair and the wideness of your lips and your nose and the gorgeous honey nut brownness color of your skin. I just don't see any of that. That's really condescending. It's saying, I refuse to see you as you are, and it kind of makes me a little upset. But I tend to say, well, look, then, color blindness is something that science is working on a fix for. So let's help you out. I am black. You may call me that.
It does. I'm
Right,
guilty.
so,
I have been guilty perhaps of even overcompensating in the past where I think I want to see your heart as colorblind. No, I don't want to end up judging you in as far as how I treat you, how I perceive you, your value to me based on the color of your skin. So I say that, well, color does not matter. And so what I do is I'll say something like colorblind. Perhaps it's an inappropriate way of expressing that sentiment.
Look at the verbs you just used. Treat, judge, value. You don't want to badly treat me. You don't want to judge me based on some arbitrary fact of my birth. And you want to value me as a person, not as, awesome-haired honey nut brown thing. So you're treating me as a human being. That's what matters. My race does not inform the way you behave toward me. We've met a number of times. You've never run up to me and went, "What's up?" Or not necessarily that everybody sees a black person and goes all stereotype. You look at me and go, "Hello, Jamila, it's good to see you."
I wrap my arms around you and I give you a big hug when I see you is exactly what I do.
And that's all that any human can do when addressing another human. Hi, I see you. I recognize you. Let's deal with each other and go from there. So there is such a thing as too much sensitivity. And as somebody who wouldn't know tact if it came up in bitter, I'm probably not guilty of that.
Alix Jules, when you were speaking in Florida, you spoke a little bit, and you can speak to this much better than I'm paraphrasing. I'm setting you up here, but you were talking about how our politics should be colorblind, that type of thing. Did you want to speak to that in greater depth?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that should be colorblind, but they're not, right? When we look at each other, our descriptors put us in context, right? I mean, it tells you, or should at least imply, what my background might be. It may put me in context as in, historical context. What did I go through, et cetera? So when having a conversation with me about what is or what shouldn't be colorblind, you got to kind of put me and everything else around you, because everything is relative, in context. So, yes, there are certain things that we should take somewhat of a blind eye to, right, when we look at justice, et cetera. But the reality is we don't live in a world that is colorblind. We don't live in a country that is colorblind. So to propagate this wonderful notion, and it is a great, brilliant, nonsensical idea that I can't relate to, because when I get into a car and I get pulled over in Alabama, Mississippi, or even in Texas, right, that officer is not colorblind. I may be doing absolutely nothing, but I guarantee you he sees my color.
Let's talk about Martin Luther King Jr., and let's talk about the Reverend before the name of so many people who were part of the civil rights movement. This Reverend allows many of them to be completely insulated from challenge in some circles, and you can tell me if that's accurate, but I mean, it's almost a deification of many of these icons. And it's, in some ways, insulates the church from an honest eye. The church brought us together. The church made us strong. The church gave us community. The church did or did not play a significant role in the civil rights movement.
Perception is reality, right? And the idea is that when you have people like Reverend whatever, and there's a long list I like to talk about, it does give them a little bit, it immediately puts them on a pedestal. They are almost beyond reproach because of the relationship that blacks have with the church. When you look at the civil rights in general, it was the church, and not necessarily just the leaders. It was the church and the way that it's connected to the black community in general, the social services that we derive or use from the church, etc. We have a real connection with the church. And so it allowed us to disseminate information, and we were allowed, hundreds of years back, one of the only places that we could get together was the church, right? And worshiping a God that allowed us to be enslaved. But that's that's a little bit of a different topic. But when you take a look at the parallel with Moses, let my people go, being led out, and how Martin Luther King became that black Moses, it's very easy for you to see the parallel. It really is. And when you're when you've got the Bible in hand and you're on the mic and you are selling people hope for their pain, and honestly, being black in the U.S. is very different than being anything else in the U.S., you might need a little bit of soothing. So that's one of the reasons why it's so sticky.
Jamila or Bridgette, you want to jump in on that? Or
I was just thinking about how this ties into the rise of black secularism. 50 years ago, when the civil rights movement was still in full force, the church was the kind of the epicenter for economic and social change. But I think that because it's not so much, there's a lot more options for blacks, that is part of the reason behind this rise in secularism. Those of us who are a little younger don't feel like, okay, church is where I need to be, so there is a little bit more exploration. But that might be a little off topic. So
we'll come back to that here in just a second. I like it. Jamila Bey?
I love to talk about this because even though I wasn't alive back in the height of the American so-called civil rights movement, it was more than a civil rights movement. It was a human rights movement. It was a women's rights movement. It was a labor movement. I don't mean to be derogatory when I call it the so-called American civil rights movement. It's just that's shorthand, and it was so much more than that. I wasn't alive. There are a lot of people who were alive, and they will tell you churches were a place of sanctuary, literal, particularly if you were in the South. Pop quiz. Why did Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., give him all his titles, get put in the Birmingham jail? He called a boycott and went around in Alabama talking about this. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. broke Alabama state law. Black people could not call for a boycott. They could not gather more than 2 of them in any one place except for a church, right? So if you want to get a whole bunch of black folks together and circumvent Jim Crow era laws, you call it a church meeting and you show up. If you go to a church where you tend to know the people around and you see somebody you don't recognize, you actually do pull out your hymnals and pray or sing or whatever you do with a hymnal. I'm not real good. I don't go to church. Anyhow, the issue why the black movement for self-determination and civil rights happened in churches was that they were places you could meet, they were communities that could identify interlopers and those who were actually doing something, and cops were loath to go into churches and start knocking heads and breaking things up, as they would do in community centers or people's homes. So the utility of the black church was a literal, actual sanctuary in a lot of places. The need for the belief in a supernatural higher power a la Jesus to make people say, you will get the boot of oppression off of my neck, that's not necessary. People were kind of upset about the inequality without the need for a church to tell them so. I can go on forever, but I will not. Suffice it to say, it's the victor telling the story. The church has co-opted the narrative. But please remember, the NAACP and a whole lot of other groups all through civil rights and the self and the movement for self-preservation and respect and full citizenship, these groups in a lot of places and a lot of times were founded by secular Jews, socialist blacks, atheists them all, or the many. There were, not all of them, that's not fair to say, but there were quite a few atheists, not even closeted or hidden atheists, who were very instrumental in American civil rights. And the last thing I will say is A. Philip Randolph, the father of the labor movement among African Americans, the reason for the rise of any kind of black middle class, let it be known that he was an atheist when he was doing all that organizing, and the American Humanist Association recognized him as Humanist of the Year while he was alive. So, yeah, churches were buildings that were easy to get to, and they had big T-shapes on the top so people could see them very easily.
Yeah, it's uncanny how much we hear about Martin Luther King Jr., but A. Philip Randolph, he formed the first black labor union. He was part of the 63 March on Washington. He founded the Negro American Labor Council. Labor. Yeah, the guy was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by LBJ. and yet you never really hear him spoken about, at least not nearly to the level that you will hear the names of others. I promise I will get to the switchboard and we'll field some calls here in just a second, but I want to get through a little bit of this sort of introductory list that I've got. By design, then, what's happened is that the church is set up so that if you speak out against the church or the Christian God in this capacity, do you look like you are betraying your race?
I think so. I know that, my personal story had a little bit of that. I went from doubting Thomas to Uncle Tom real quick. The reality is, and Jamila actually touched on it, it's about the narrative. And we have people out there who are telling us what it means to be black or how to be black. And unfortunately, in that narrative, and the people that do help craft that narrative happen to be a lot of the reverends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it is not just an issue of separation of church and state, it's church and race, right? You can't do it in the black community. Quite often, it is inextricably tied, and that's really unfortunate, and it's a lie. To the victor goes the spoils, right? So they are writing that. And why wouldn't you? I mean, take a look at what the church has to benefit from its further success. So why not continue to co-opt the narrative? And even in the black community, just like the general population community, atheists have a PR problem. It's not a moral problem. It's a PR problem. People don't understand who we are, what we believe, etc. Or you have all of these preconceived notions of what an atheist is that even in the black community, when you say, I'm a humanist or I'm a secular humanist, don't understand that. Well, I'm an atheist. Well, what does that mean? I don't believe in God. What do you mean you don't believe in God? You're black.
Well, I want to bring up a quote from Jamila Bey in the Huffington Post. In the religion column, they had an article called Blacks Mirroring Larger U.S. Trend Come Out as Non-Believers. And she was quoted as saying, you renounce your blackness, essentially, when you say you don't believe in God. You renounce your blackness. You almost denigrate your heritage and history of the people if you claim atheism. You want to elaborate, Jamila?
Yeah, you
Or you said it. You just said it so well the first time.
No, in many circles, you say you're an atheist. That's that white people thing. You think you're better than us, And I don't do group identity very well. Yes, I identify with a number of groups, but first and foremost, I have the luxury of living in a country that acknowledges me first as an individual. For whatever reason, I do hold on to that. But when you are dealing with in-group communication, there are a whole lot of black folks that in 2014 will say, oh, I never knew another black atheist, or I didn't know black people could be atheists. And I'm going, okay, well, here's the thing. We know that the species that we are originated on the continent that we call Africa today. And there were people who, when looking up to the sky, going, who am I and why am I here, disbelieved the stories of the gods they were told, gave them rain, gave them grain, made the gazelles run past them. There have always been people who said, prove it, show me. Jennifer Michael Hecht's book, Doubt, D-O-U-B-T, Doubt, get it, read it. There have always been people who have said, this is just a story, it's not true. And that has been through history, and that happens today. And whether or not you live in a place where you are aware of other people, oh, they're there. They're absolutely there. We're everywhere.
Bridgette Gaudette, is it a form of social suicide to say, I'm black and I'm an atheist?
It can be. I have an anecdotal story. I used to be an HIV medical case manager, and unfortunately most of the clients were African American, black, whatever you want to say, and almost everyone that worked there was black too. When I was interviewed about my book about becoming an atheist, once everyone found out, it was a completely different vibe. People stopped talking to me. They would make comments like, oh, now I see why you're with a white guy. It was just all this stuff. Oh, I connect your whiteness. It makes so much sense because you're an atheist too. And there was even one nurse, when she was told it, she gave me a dirty look and never spoke to me again. So it's unfortunately, and I think every black atheist that you talk to will have these kind of stories. Once people find out that you're an atheist, it's a big deal. You're kind of this dirty person. They don't want to have anything to do with you. I also worked for a pastor at that time, and I didn't last there much longer. So, yeah, it can be social suicide. My grandfather was a deacon, completely unacceptable. My parents are very, very religious. They have nothing to do with me. So, yeah, it's a big deal. And, I think it's important to tell people, like the girl that wrote in, it's not always a great thing to just come out and tell everybody that you're an atheist, because it can be financially difficult, socially, everything. You have to take all these things into consideration when you're Black and you want to let people know that you're an atheist.
A recent Pew Forum on religion and public life said that more than 8 in 10 Black women, 84%, say religion is very important to them. Roughly 6 in 10 say they attend religious services at least once a week. Any one of you, what drives that? Why the higher level of religiosity?
I'm going, when I went to church, why did I go? Okay, so let's throw out a few reasons. Churches are awesome at childcare. You have a place to put your kid for a while where they get to socialize. What if you actually like the people in your church? It's a great place where you know people are going to show up. Have you ever been to a Black church? They're fun. People are falling out in the aisles. There's a lot of dancing. There are hats galore. Honey, the fashion is a reason to go in and of itself.
Now, the music service alone is like 90 minutes before they even get into the message. It's just... It's a party.
It's a party. The churches can be really fun. And then if you go to one of the churches that has the repast afterwards, you get fed. So, there's a lot of reasons. Sometimes people like to go and get dressed up and put on their finest, and it's a ritual. It's a way they get to see their aunties and the old ladies on the usher boards dressed all nice, and it can take them back to a time when they did it as young people. I don't think that anybody is saying that ritual is bad. Let me tell you about my Sunday ritual. I sleep really late, and I wake up and spend time reading with my family. We have breakfast. Our wafers are bigger and go into the toaster first, but, we have them every Sunday. And then in the fall, we all put on our black and gold, and we stand in front of the television, and we scream, defense, all in unity. We get excited. Our blood pressure goes up when we're excited, and then when we score and beat the Dallas Cowboys, we tend to feel much better, and it's awesome. It's people are going to gather and have a good time, whether it's a knitting circle, whether it's a prayer circle, whether it's a football circle. Churches serve a very vital function. We are a social animal. We like getting together, especially when you see people you like, or you hear music you like, or you do a ritual that you like.
Dare I ask if Alix or Bridgette want to add anything to that particular angle there, or you guys want to jump in? What?
So mine was a little bit different because, I kind of grew up in the Catholic Church initially, right? And so there's not a whole lot of dancing. And I grew up in the hood in Brooklyn, and so it was not uncommon for me to see people shot or have friends pass away, etc., relatives, it didn't matter. So when I have that as my backdrop, and that's the overall theme, where the majority of the people I grew up with were either in jail or in casket before the age of 18, not even 25, I was going to church, one, a lot of times it was funerals, right, to say goodbye, or it was because my single mom was taking me to make sure that I didn't fall into that crowd. And a lot of times they were going to make sure that God was going to take care of me, right? And God was going to provide some level of protection, because it's kind of hard when the street light goes out, and it goes out because it was shot out, and you don't know where your kid is at. You kind of have to depend on hope, at least, or hope that someone out there is taking care of your kid. So at least with my background, the church was somewhere a lot of people got hope, because we weren't getting jobs and, et cetera, et cetera. It was a bad situation. It's very much what you see in places like India, the whole Mother Teresa syndrome, right? Where you see pain and suffering, religion thrives. Same thing in the Black ghetto.
Bridgette, you want to chime in?
Well, I didn't have a traditional Black church experience because I was Jehovah's Witness. So the congregation that I went to was actually...
Man. So did you get shunned?
That's a whole other episode.
I mean, you're totally... Is that the reason that mom and dad have cut you off? Or is it more about the fact that it was just not done because you're Black?
It's a mix. Yes, I ended up having sex before I was married, and that was really bad, and that's a big part of the reason why they don't talk to me. But I've noticed a trend that when that happens with Black Jehovah's Witnesses, that the punishment tends to be a little bit harsher among the family members. They are more easy to cut you off because religion is so enmeshed in the culture. It just is. We went to church 2-3 times a week, and it was very insulated. So for me, church was a safe haven because everybody outside of church were the bad guys.
Before I go to the switchboard, one last thing. We're talking about the church. Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist, took a very hard line on the church. This is a quote from the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. It says this: "I therefore hate the corrupt, slave-holding, women-whipping, cattle-plundering, partial, and hypocritical Christianity of the land. I look upon it as the climax of all misnomers, the boldest of all frauds, and the grossest of all libels. Never was there a clearer case of, quote, stealing the livery of the court of heaven to serve the devil in, unquote. I'm filled with unutterable loathing when I contemplate the religious pomp and show together with the horrible inconsistencies which everywhere surround me. We have men stealers for ministers, women whippers for missionaries, and cradle plunderers for church members. The man who wields the blood-clotted cowskin during the week fills the pulpit on Sunday and claims to be a minister of the meek and lowly Jesus. The slave auctioneer's bell and the church-going bell chime in with each other, and the bitter cries of the heartbroken slave are drowned in the religious shouts of his pious master. The larger question here, obviously, is that some see the church as just another form of slavery. You are indentured to the church, and it is just another form of control."
I just keep going back to the fact that, yes, that is historically part of the problem, but I really just feel that we're moving away from that the church is, releasing its hold on us in many ways just because of modernity. So I don't know, somebody else would probably be better to speak to that, because I just kind of think that that's not so much the case anymore, that there's something else going on.
The larger question is this just a way of controlling people, taking advantage of people, of a culture, of a skin color, to sort of exercise control, or is the church just a social club these days, or both?
Population management, moral management, it very much was. The issue that we have is we've kind of picked up the whips, at least some of the churches, because they still have a lot of the same types of slave sermons that we saw once upon a time ago. A lot of the messaging hasn't changed in many non-prosperity-based doctrine. So, yeah, I don't know if it was intentional, but I still see it, especially in the South. You're not prosperous because you're not good enough. And for me, that's a really evil kind of doctrine, right? Because it kind of takes away the ability of being, successful. And that's actually one of the things that plagues the quote-unquote Black psyche. You can move on and do it by yourself. You can go beyond what the Black church defines as success and lift yourself by the bootstraps, kind of, but you have this level of control, your own limitations that stop you from doing so. And so I learned behavior.
Jamila Bey?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. I really think that the utility of the Black church has outlived itself. There will always be people who are attracted to it and join up, but the fact that your average high schooler is walking around with more computational power in his back pocket than sent the early men to the moon means that whenever he has a question, whenever she has a question, that young person can Google and disprove that pastor. Religion will not survive the internet and the free flow of information. You look to the Middle East where you see that women, those literally voiceless and burqa'd, were the driving social force in what we Westerners have been calling the Arab Spring. That is as much a revolution against the oppressive force that can be religion as the oppressive force of any political regime. Now, I'm not trying to say that what we call the Arab Spring is only a religious protest, but there is a big part of that I think Western media in particular has not addressed. When we look to Black America, when we look to larger world culture of which Black America is a part, we see that doubt and faith are warring with each other. Faith is beginning to really lose out. And while Black folks and Black women in particular do continue to be the most self-reported religious adherents, we do see that those numbers are in decline. You should read some of the stuff written by pastors for pastors. Black men aren't in the church anymore. And these pastors are terrified. How do you get your men to take back the helm of the family and bring their families to Jesus? They're writing, how do you get single people in the church? How do you minister when your flock doesn't believe that homosexuality is against God? Young people are leaving because they're tired of messages they feel are hateful toward their gay friends. Young people are leaving because they're tired of being told stuff that they can Google and disprove. So the churches have a lot of work cut out for them, and young folks, men, parents, people who want definitive proof are leaving, and a lot of those people look as I do.
One of the, and this is my hope, right, and a little bit irrational, but God is becoming more of a cultural phenomenon and just socially acceptable, and that's it. Unfortunately, with those that are self-reporting, they still believe that it's a good thing to have faith and not necessarily challenge, etc. Again, it's part of the narrative that's been crafted for them. In reality, especially with the 18 to 35 and younger, right, we're seeing this with the younger generation, God's not really very relevant. Church might be, but God really isn't.
Although the community doesn't rely on the church so much as it did back in, the Jim Crow era, it still Black folks tend to look to the church when it comes to solving injustices. And a lot of that has to do with how glamorized the civil rights movement was. So it's like Alix said, they still believe, they want to find this support there, but that's because of how it was in the past. And like Jamila said, but there's so much more information out there that it's changing how we see the church.
Talking here with Alix Jules. He's the coordinator for DFW Coalition of Reason. He's the president of Black Nonbelievers of Dallas. Bridgette Gaudette is the executive director of the Florida Humanist Association. And Jamila Bey is director of communications with the Secular Student Alliance. Let's go to the switchboard and talk to area code 413. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, Seth. My name is Matthias. I've actually been a listener for some time and first-time caller, so I'm really lucky to be the first one in. How are you doing?
Great to have you on the air. Thanks for calling. What do you have for us tonight?
Hi, I'd actually like to bring up something that Christopher Hitchens once mentioned. He said something about how he actually doubted whether or not the president was sincere in the swearing in on the Bible, and I'd like to get the opinion from the three guests, and I'd also like to bring up the fact that I have it written down here somewhere. I'm in a very politically progressive area, and there just seems to be a strong surge of religiosity in every racial denomination, not just the Black denomination, to the point where there's still a church on every street. And I'm just wondering if you are seeing that from your perspective as well in your places in the country.
All right, let's start with the president. Is he faking it?
look, he was raised by a secular humanist mother. He went to Harvard, that bastion of atheism that it is. I think he probably had a conversion about the time when he realized that he wasn't getting nowhere with Michelle if he didn't at least, pretend to, see eye to eye with wanting to go to church. I have yet to encounter someone who was raised without religion who made a serious, lasting conversion as an adult. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means I haven't seen it, and I've been in D.C. a while covering politics and politicians. I doubt that most politicians believe what they spew.
Bridgette, do you want to weigh in?
I just think that we have to go by what he says. If he says that he believes, then I'm just going to have to accept that. I mean, he obviously is very progressive as far as those things are concerned. He's skeptical. He has, quote unquote, evolved on many subjects. So, but I still just have to go by what if the man says he's a Christian, then I'll accept it.
Alex?
Yeah, so, for me, if he says he's not Kenyan, he says he's not Muslim, I don't believe any of that, no. But I'm going to challenge him on his faith. No, honestly, I'm just going to have to take him on his word on that.
We're looking at 20 years under the Reverend Jeremiah Wright. That's hard for some of us to stomach. And I want to know what that's about. I mean, I legitimately want to know what it's about.
When we start talking about what is labeled liberation theology, and there are so many incarnations of that are out there. We see it with the Nation of Islam and the Five Percenters, et cetera, all technically quote-unquote religious groups that don't necessarily have a die-hard deistic or theistic doctrine that ties back to an actual deity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It tends to be more about something else. And so even under Jeremiah Wright, it could very well have been not necessarily about God, but about social issues. Now, this goes back to a lot of the reality for not just black atheists, but black people in general. We got social issues that we still are trying to address, that we're talking about, and it permeates everything. It is in our barbershops. It's in our salons. Yeah, I'm going to go with all the stereotypes, right? Barbershops, salons.
It's true.
But it's all true. Exactly. We're still talking about social issues where no one else is.
Did any of those answer your question, my friend?
Actually, yeah. I did not actually know that he was raised secular humanist, so that's news to me. And I guess it kind of further affirms the fact that if he comes out later on, I mean, I'm guessing even now he's not in a position where he can just come out as an atheist and say, oh, I've been an atheist this whole time, because he still has a prospective political career beyond his presidency. So, but somewhere down the line, if he comes out and says, oh, by the way, I never really believed this, I confess I won't be terribly surprised. And, I don't buy the whole Muslim thing or any other conspiracy issues about him being some kind of secret leader of the Illuminati, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You mentioned Harvard. I live actually 2 hours away in the town of Northampton, Massachusetts, and that's like the Five College area. But we're also really big on conspiracies here too. Like, everybody's deifying Anonymous and those groups, saying that there's some kind of heroes, with the Guy Fawkes masks and everything,
That was a Catholic protest. Nobody realizes that, but look up the reason why Guy Fawkes got hanged. He was supporting the Catholic Church.
I have no love for any of that movement or the subsequent deification of the. I see them as domestic terrorists, and I mean, I'm not saying that their ideals weren't good, but we're going off on a tangent, and I don't.
Now we're spinning off the rails. I'm going to reel us back in here real fast, my friend. I'm going to let you go. We're going to talk a little bit more here on the second part of your question. Okay, he did speak about what he considered to be a rise in sort of religiosity, even among progressive communities. I don't know. Are you seeing that? Yes, no.
It's pretty heathen here in D.C. I also live in a city with a healthy population of people who practice Judaism, so.
And I'm not seeing a pronounced rise in certain regions. I don't know that I'm seeing revival, contrary to what the pastors from the pulpits are telling us. So.
Yeah, more people are doubtful than anything else, in my experience. But I'm also in D.C., so.
I traveled south, right? So I'm gonna tell you, it's not that we're seeing more, but we sure are seeing louder.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say, I like to believe that the religious right is feeling the pressure of secularism, so they are getting a little bit more. They're getting squeakier. They're definitely getting louder. They're definitely beginning to push the envelope, whether it is female autonomy or whether it is, hey, we are going to reintroduce various forms of legislation that are going to discriminate whomever. It doesn't matter who. We're going to push that because, you know what, that's religious freedom. Not freedom from religion, but the freedom to do as what they believe or interpret the Bible mandates them to do. So they're definitely and I'll just put it out there, pissed off old white men are really not happy with the idea of, me and all my brown friends mating so much. Right?
Their daughters.
Y'all are not happy with that because eventually it will translate to the ballot.
Is this panic mode, though? I mean, they're going into panic mode. They're going to become more extreme. They're going to say more inflammatory things, more bizarre, knee-jerk things, which in turn, I think, draws a larger circle around the insanity of it all, which causes them to get even louder and say crazier things. Do you see this is actually part of our solution? Maybe all of this, this sort of ramping up is going to help us in the long run?
Yes, absolutely, because what I'm seeing is this really interesting dichotomy of people that are joining atheist or free-thinking groups. They're either really, really liberal and they're slowly crossing over into free thought, right? So you got this little gray area where they kind of sort of don't believe, et cetera. Then you've got the really extreme, and when the extreme gets too extreme, they walk away. They're like, all right, I can't buy any of this at this point, and I'm just going to jump off the bandwagon altogether.
Let them jump, man. Let them go. Area code 607. Thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hey, it's John from upstate New York again. Good to hear from you, sir.
What do you have, John?
My question for the panel. I'm a history teacher, and from time to time, particularly when we go over the units of slavery and things like that, and try to relate it or start to talk about today and the vision of African Americans in church and this whole topic of conversation, I've had a couple of students ask me, well, how did this happen? How is it that a culture assimilated or took on the religion of the people who enslaved them? How is it possible that the African American community throughout the centuries of American history absorbed or assimilated the religion of the people who took away their humanity, their dignity, and their lives?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this two ways. One, many times, and this was in the beginning, the choice was accept, convert, or die, right? I mean, because when you pull away and you showed any level of defiance, you got the Nat Turner label, right? And we know what happened there. But I want to take this back and look at this in context. When you look at domination, and this is an area where we can talk about white supremacy in context. When you look at it in that worldview, this is nothing new. The Romans did it, we saw this, and it is a standard operating procedure to have another culture or race, in this particular instance. You're able to matriculate them into society by forcing the adoption of your religion onto theirs. Now, that's not always the case, right? Sometimes you would see some level of cohabitation and coexistence, sometimes with the French, not so much with the Spaniards, but sometimes you would see that. And those cultures were able to flourish and exist and live kind of side by side while you still have the auspices of slavery there. So it's not really new, but that tactic. And again, when it's given to you by your ancestors, sometimes, especially with African Americans, when you take a look at how you identify the persona, especially when it's been taken away from you, it's as good as what was given to you by your ancestors, right? What does it mean to be black? And a lot of times it means, what was my grandparent? What were my ancestors, etc., up to a point. Because you can cross that line, and we're not often taught the long-term history of Africa, or what is now called Africa, and the fact that, hey, there weren't Christians there, even though, take a look at the Middle East. The Middle East is actually part of Africa, so Jesus would have probably been African of some sort. We don't talk about that. We never go that far. It's always in context.
I was talking to John W. Loftus, and he was speaking about how when many of the slaves were taught to read, they were taught to read the Bible. Mm-hmm. And it was the Bible or you don't learn to read kind of a thing. It may have been thrust upon them as part of the culture, as part of the time period. I don't know. He can probably speak to that much more than I could. Jamila or Bridgette, you want to jump in here?
Well, this is Bridgette. I also think that the fact that, when the slaves were brought over, a lot of the oral history is probably lost. There were family breakups. A mother might not have her child to pass those things along, and that child might be raised by someone who's from a completely different region. And I was also going to bring up the thing about what they were learning how to read was the Bible. And that's the people that were, they were enslaved, but these people were still taking care of them. These are the things that were drilled into them. And I don't think it's unusual for, the Native Americans. Most of them, they were killed if they didn't convert as well. So it's not unusual for a group that is taken over to adopt the religion of the people that captured them.
Jamila, you good? You want to say something real quick?
Asked and answered.
John, I hope that answers your question. Anything else real quick before we move on?
This is, again, I feel particularly because of where I live and the culture that I grew up in, I don't have much of a vote on the issue, but I'm very curious and I'm very interested in how the growth and development of the N-word, if you allow me to say that. And, like you're having...
Just say the word.
I'm sorry.
No, don't say the word. Look, I'd rather you not, please. All right, okay. Go ahead and finish your question. Please. Go ahead and finish your question. The origin, the usage of it, what?
Well, just like you're talking, like there's conversations now about the NFL penalizing players who say it on the field. And I've heard a lot of debates, a lot of discussions on the usage and the connotations, and I just find the conversation fascinating, but I don't feel that I have a vote on it because I never grew up in that sort of culture. Right. So I'm just curious to the panel.
I'm going to let these guys address that, John. Thanks for the call, John. It's a minefield that we're walking into, but let's talk about it. We're going to educate each other on what all this is about. It's a derogatory term. It's a term of endearment. It's a loaded word. What do we do with the N-word? Anybody?
Okay. I'll go.
There's not enough time to go into it.
I was looking at the closet. Okay. So he didn't get to vote. I never got the ballot either.
I didn't get a vote either.
I didn't get a vote either, right? But I'm going to say, in part, I think it has to be generational. I know that, we have a subculture that has adopted the word and is using it as a term of endearment. But for me, and this is, I don't use the word. I find it very derogatory. I find it still very offensive because I understand the history behind it. Whether it's my whatever or it doesn't really matter. And even in New York, where it was part of the vernacular, you're not going to come talking like that to me. It's just not going to happen. Or, it's just not going to happen. Do I think it's okay for anyone in general to use it? I don't necessarily think so. I won't censor speech, right? Because I want to be able to say how I feel on it. But no, I don't think it's ever what's up my cracker? Does that work for you?
It doesn't work for me, Alex. I'm just saying.
Okay.
All right. Bridgette, what do you think?
Well, my issue is with using the phrase the N-word because I feel like it takes away the sting that needs to be there that the actual word has. We all know when somebody says the N-word, we're all thinking what the word is. So I don't like to use the word. I don't. But I feel like trying to minimize the power behind the word by saying the N-word, I don't like that.
Well, see it a little bit differently from some of us. We simply just don't want to use the word. I don't want it to be part of my vernacular. I don't want to use the word. So I sort of refer to it in another capacity. I'm cheating, Bridgette.
But it bothers me. I think we need to be bothered. If we're going to have this discussion, then saying the N-word, we're all seeing the actual word in our head, are we not?
It's true.
Just say it. And so that's my only comment as far as that's concerned. So
Jamila Bey.
I'm only going to defer because I will not shut the bleep up. You want to talk about words? I am the staunchest defender of the First Amendment you're going to meet, but I don't say the name of Washington, D.C.'s football team. I call those people the racial slurs, and I certainly don't use a racial slur that was intended to strip from me my humanity and in many a context my family and my actual literal life. We ain't got enough time. Buy me a drink at the convention and go on all night there.
So much negative baggage, so much vitriol, so much toxicity attached to that word. I don't want anything to do with it. And I think a lot of people feel the way we do about it. Area code 443. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, this is Raina Rhodes. I had a question like eons ago, but now that I'm on the line, now that, obviously you guys are very popular tonight, but now that I'm on the line and I've lost my question, I just wanted to add a little comment to the conversation. I think earlier you quoted Frederick Douglass, and I believe that you said something about Jeremiah Wright. And I just wanted to kind of point out something that you may or may not have considered. Jeremiah Wright is a part of the same tradition that you're calling upon when you talk about Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass wasn't just calling out the church or Christianity in general. He was calling out a very particular type of Christianity, which was hypocritical in how it dealt with slavery and issues of freedom. And that was what he was critiquing. That type of hypocrisy is the same hypocrisy that he was critiquing in his speech, what the 4th of July means to a slave. And that is the same sort of hypocrisy that was being called out by Jeremiah Wright in a way that I think many people felt negatively towards, but they didn't have a real understanding of where that intellectual tradition comes from. It's a tradition that calls out hypocrisy in how we deal with race and the subject of rights in this country. And so I just wanted to say that since I lost my thought.
Well, that's all right. Honestly, I respect that. I myself agree with Christopher Hitchens in terms of Reverend Jeremiah Wright. I think his church is a rock and roll horror show. I mean, I just think it's pure theater. It's over the top. It's very conspiracy minded. I understand what you're talking about, using the church, using gatherings, using community to perhaps address, in his way, social justice issues, address issues in regard to race and whatnot. I just don't see it as a productive or effective way to do so. Now, I'm on the outside looking in, and there are others who will be able to speak to it better than I do, but I just think we can do better than Jeremiah Wright.
And you know what? And that is your perspective. And I think that we can do better than Christopher Hitchens. And that's just how I feel about the situation.
All right, fair enough. Do you guys want to speak to that?
I'm enjoying this. I'm being quiet.
No. I want you guys to weigh in here. You guys can speak to this as well. Go ahead.
Do I have to? Because that was so good. Radar, are you still on the line?
No, she just took off, or we lost her call. I don't know if she was.
You know what? I challenge everyone who heard that exchange to listen to, the Malcolm X speech that Denzel Washington performed so well in the Spike Lee movie X. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock landed on us. Listen to the Jeremiah Wright sermon, God Damn the USA. That is a particular rhetorical tradition. It is something that any black pastor, whether or not he does it, is trained in doing it. It is the way that black folk in this country who have gone to church have poured forth their lamentations unto their Lord. It is a way of being in this world but not of it. It is a way of saying I am in this political system but not of it, and I am calling it out. I am screaming to the sky to be heard, to be recognized. Jeremiah Wright, I have to admit I've never been to his church. I don't know the man beyond that particular sermon, but Jeremiah Wright did what a whole lot of black pastors do and said what a whole lot of black pastors say. And if you want to call Jeremiah Wright the rock and roll horror show or whatever.
Yeah, well, that was the phrase that was used, yeah.
There are a whole lot of other rock and roll horror shows. That's what churches are. That's what they do.
Hitchens is not here, obviously, to participate in the discussion, but I interpreted it as just the sheer over-the-top sort of theater of it. The shouting, the pounding, the over-the-top sort of intensity of it all is what he was speaking to. He was speaking to the theater of what was going on, sort of a grand spectacle. And that may or may not be the case. Obviously, he's not here to fill us in, but that's how I...
That's a black religious rhetorical tradition that... I mean, hell, I could...
there's some white churches that do it.
If I wanted to.
Dude,
there are white pastors who do the same thing. It's a Southern political thing when you get in the pulpit and you talk a certain way. God damn, you know what I mean. It's an act.
Amen.
We can all do it. And it was a politically motivated reason that folks went after Jeremiah Wright when they did. He is like a lot of other pastors who do the same thing. Amen, brothers and sisters, pass the plate. And
I was raised in a little country church called Evangel Assembly. Reverend Billy Wheeler, guy was as white as the day is long, ran around with a blood red face from screaming, playing a tambourine during the sermon, and he qualifies as a rock and roll horror show. I totally understand what he's talking about. So. I don't know. Bridget,
Jamila,
Alex, you guys want to chime in? What do you think?
Jamila, you did that so well. I already have my wallet.
Yep.
Just the whole wallet. No, I mean this is again black liberation theology. I mean this is something that is in our culture, especially when it is tied, although so loosely, with political power. When we start looking at, and just right in the title, liberation, right? I mean, everyone has this misnomer that, hey, black people are free because, Jim Crow's gone and there are no quote-unquote slavery laws out there anymore, right? You can't have But the reality is a lot of us don't necessarily feel that we are free, and that's the reality that we deal in. And when you have and I'll even use the word peddler because I refer to most preachers as peddlers, but no disrespect. What they're selling is something that their congregations want to hear. They're asking for it. And so there's definitely a market there. And yes, it is part of the black tradition. And because it's tied to politics and sociological reform, it's not going away anytime soon.
It's the modern day let my people go.
To tell a religious mother and father anyway that you are a non-believer is pretty hairy. Is there a hard belief in a literal hell in the black church?
Goddamn right there is.
They teach hell from the pulpit? I mean, a literal depart from me, all you who are cursed, kind of a fire and damnation?
I know that there are milder approaches, but I know for a fact that, hell is a real place and the devil is real and demons are real and they can possess you. And if you don't believe it, then you are going to be shown when that hour comes. Yeah, there are a whole lot of people that actually believe that bull crap. And the sad part is that they infect their children with these abusive beliefs. The fear of hell, there are children who literally actually have parents who say, I will beat the hell out of you. Normal childhood rebellion is not that. It is the devil, and it is to be beaten out of you. Not every family that believes in a literal hell, but quite a few. And it's a sad thing, it's a scary thing, and it's a delusional false thing. And I will call it out every chance I get.
I was just going to say, from everything I've read, especially Black Christians, but all Black theists tend to take their holy books more literal than the average non-Black. So, yeah, as far as hell, it is absolutely real, just as real as heaven and angels and all the good things.
I find that to be very true as well, and we tend to be a little bit more superstitious as well. I like to say that that's something that we can very much achieve, especially if we start bridging the achievement gap, etc. But, I had a parent who didn't just want to beat the hell out of me. They wanted to beat the black off of me. That's a separate issue.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, hang on just a second. I'm going to come back to that. What do you mean by superstitious? Are we talking about walking under ladders kind of superstitious, or what do you mean by that?
It tends to be, ghost-related, demons, haunting, stuff like that. Not necessarily walking under ladders, but it is not uncommon for, at least where I grew up, of course I have more of a Haitian background. Voodoo never left Haiti, and it came to the U.S., and we have these images that are perpetuated in media of ghosts and sightings. We have that in even the free thought community. We have people who are not very skeptical and new agey, etc. I see that tends to be magnified in the Black community, and it does tend to reflect some of the education discrepancies that we're trying to address.
Mm-hmm. Why would he want to beat the black off of you? Help me understand this. What's the story?
Jamila talks about this really well, especially when it's, spare the rod, spoil the child.
You are a darling.
So it's a very disciplinarian culture. It's almost like you're going to fear me as much as you love me kind of thing?
You're going to fear me. Love is optional. You're going to fear me.
Wow. I'll give you something to cry about.
Train up a child in the way he should go. To train up a child has killed little white children too. That doctrine that says that you beat the child because that is what you are commanded to do as the spiritual leader of your family. It is better to beat a child than to leave his soul to the ways of the world and the potential hell. Yeah, a couple of people I want to shout out. Vicki Garrison of the blog No Longer Quivering talks about the abuse culture. Again, not all, but some. Not just some, but a lot of religious adherents can fall into. Janet Heimlich, who's a reporter who covers religious-based child abuse, has a foundation whose name escapes me at the moment or whatnot, but she's out of Austin, Texas, and holds conferences about how to prevent religious child abuse for religious people. There's an author called Dolan Hickman who's written a novel about religious child abuse and what happens when a young abused boy grows up and wrestles with his demons of abuse as an adult. It's starting to be talked about because it is so prevalent. We know that neurology teaches us that when you beat a child, there are changes to his brain that are not undone. We know that when you beat a child, there are ways she may act out that will lead to her choosing an abusive spouse someday. Not all, but it's better than anecdotal. There are studies that actually do point to this. So beating in the name of God is just, our science is teaching us that's really, really bad when you do it. And even people who are adherents to religion are starting to say, maybe we should try something different.
I'm reminded of that old Bill Cosby routine where he talked about his dad looking at him and going, I brought you into this world. I'll take you out and I'll make another one that looks just like you. Kind of thing. I guess that's a thing.
But he's joking about murdering his child to the child he's threatening to murder. Yeah. Real funny, Dad.
Yeah. I'm going to give each one of you kind of the last word on this topic, but is there a resource I'm guessing that there are a lot of people who are flying under the radar, or maybe they're new atheists and they're trying to find support, trying to find community, trying to be reminded that they're not alone, trying to find resources to get educated. And I've seen online there are social media pages for Black atheists. Are there resources or hubs or places you would recommend for people to go?
Bridgette, don't you have a book?
Well, mine does it. It's talking about, it's more varied than racial stuff. It talks about people that have lost their family because they're homosexual or because they went to prison, stuff like that. And
well, let's talk about it. What's the title of the book, Bridgette? What is it?
Grieving for the Living.
And it can be found where?
I'm still writing it. It's not out yet.
Well, it doesn't really help me now, does it? I'm trying to pitch it to our listeners, and you got it in your back pocket. Well, when it's done, give us a heads up, and we'll look for it out there in the. And will it be on Amazon? Will they find it on your own site or what?
Amazon. I have a publisher, so.
Anybody else? Is there a resource that you would recommend?
As far as resources for Blacks that might be in the closet, I mean, Google is always wonderful. There are a lot of groups, Black Nonbelievers, Inc.
I've seen some of these communities are wide open to, there's all colors, cultures, creeds, all shapes, all sizes. They call themselves Black by title, but they're saying everybody's welcome. But I think they want to throw that word out there, the word Black, so that, look, especially you, if you feel like you are alone, if you feel like that you are isolated and you need support, you'll be understood here. I'm guessing that's probably the angle that they're taking.
Here's my recommendation, and I do a lot of outreach personally. Google is great. Always look for Black Nonbelievers, Black atheists, Black skeptics, etc. I mean, we're popping up all over the place. Same thing with Latino free thinkers, Hispanic free thinkers, Hispanic atheists. Minorities are reaching out to each other. We are reaching out online. So Meetup is always a good spot for you to, go out there and find people. Facebook is great. There are open groups. There are closed groups, African American for Humanists, and those tend to be a little bit more metered, a little bit more monitored, and allows you to, really be open and start connecting. Now, my recommendation to minority atheists in general, especially like the readers that you've mentioned, is connect online, then immediately get out and meet these people. Because you can stay online and have these great conversations, etc., but you need that connection. You need to see that face, and that's how we build communities. Online communities are fine. They serve a purpose, especially when you're so few and far between. It gives you this ability to network, sometimes globally, right? I've been in positions where people are reaching out to me, hey, I'm feeling as if I'm coming to the end of my time, people in Africa or Middle East, et cetera, and I just need someone to talk to. That's great, but getting out there and grabbing someone's hand and saying, you're not alone, that has real impact. Giving someone your number, call me when you get there, so that we don't lose yet another resource. I mean, a lot of times Black atheists tend to feel as if they're being bullied. We don't talk about that, but they are. They're feeling bullied within their communities. The pressure is there. So go find someone. We are out there. We're here. We're not going anywhere.
Nobody's going to bully any of my friends while I am around. Ain't gonna happen. You're one of mine? Call me. I will fix it. Now, I want to throw out, I am now the communications director for the Secular Student Alliance. If you are in college, if you are in high school, if you care about someone who is in college or high school, please do look us up online. We have a lot of resources for joining a group, connecting you to a group, helping you to deal with illegal religious activity in your school, in your school district. Look, let's be real. Atheists can feel lonely and isolated no matter what is the hue of your skin. Particularly if you are a younger person, if you come from a religious family, if you are threatened with being kicked out for admitting that you are atheist. Nobody else has to admit they're Jewish or anything, but atheists, we got to admit it. The SSA is a resource and a place to turn, and there are conventions. If you can get to a big one or a little one, go and meet other people. Some of the best friends I have in my life, I have met at conventions where we got together because it was like, hey, none of us believe in God. God, now let's really start talking because I know you're not going to proselytize to me.
I feel like I got a pretty good closing statement from the other two. Bridgette, do you want to put a bow on it here at the end of the show for me as we talk about the rise of black secularism?
Well, there are two things. The first person that you talked about that emailed you from North Carolina, put us in touch since I'm there. Second, Jamila is actually the first black atheist I ever met openly. Oh. And I know, feel special. The last thing, I am actually, one of the questions I didn't get asked, and I'm kind of surprised about because I get asked all the time, was how does my group become more diverse? I'm actually working on a project with a sociology professor, and we're going to delve into that. We've been researching how people have integrated black churches, and so we're going to try to correlate that to how groups that are primarily white, atheist groups, can be more inclusive racially. So I think that that's something people need to think about. You know, if you have like black groups in your area, reach out to them. We can all work together, and I'm not going to wrap this up as good as Jamila or Alix could, but
we're doing great. I'll make sure that the links are provided in the description box of the podcast so the people who want to go deeper into the SSA, your local groups or what have you, can certainly do so. Alix Jules, Bridgette Gaudette, Jamila Bey, how do we do on the topic tonight? Were we respectful? Everybody communicating? Anybody offended? Everybody in a good spot? How do we do?
We did awesome. We did awesome. I don't know what you're talking about. We were fabulous.
You guys are fabulous.
Hey,
well,
Steph, are we on the air yet?
Whatever. By the way, everybody, if you get a chance to see Alix, Bridgette, or Jamila do a live speech, I know they speak all around the country at conventions, both local, regional, and national. You got to be there because they're just such good communicators. And, you know, we talked about the storytelling problem. These people are storytellers. They know how to take ideas, to take concepts, to encourage people, and to make it compelling to people who are out in the audience. And they'll just inspire you. So I encourage you to certainly check it out. Thank you all for being a part of the show tonight. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Join us next Tuesday night as we talk about religion and film. We're calling the podcast Holy Hollywood. So we talk about everything from the new Noam film with Russell Crowe to the Cecil B. DeMille classics, you know, the Ten Commandments and that kind of thing. It's religion as represented on screen at the movie theater. We'll talk about it next Tuesday night on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. I'll see you then.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.